Live stream check, 1, 2, 3. Afternoon everyone, and welcome to Colchester Town Hall and the Joint Committee's annual meeting for 2025 to 2026. I'm the clerk of the committee, Owen Howell, and I'm going to be leading us off with the first item of business, which will be election of the chairman for the 2025 to 2026 year. Make sure I've got that right. Yep. So I will open proceedings and open nominations to be taken. Now, nominations should be given and seconded before they can go to a vote. So may I call for nominations for the chairmanship for the year? Councillor Barry?
Can I nominate Councillor Paul Honeywood, please?
Thank you, Councillor Barry. Do I have a second? Got Councillor Hargreaves. Thank you. Now, we'll proceed with the vote on this, and then I will...
I just wanted to raise a point. Some of you would have seen an email that I sent. I think Councillor Honeywood is a great guy, but I am concerned about something that happened in January this year, which has led to a number of complaints and issues being raised over a parking scheme that was pushed through against certainly my advice as our representative of Colchester. And it's going to probably have to come back to this committee, I suspect, later this year for a decision, because it's created a number of, I think there may even be some code of conduct complaints, although the code of conduct complaints are not an issue for this committee. But I think it was just a case of judgment on allowing that parking scheme to go through, in the fact that it didn't appear to have the evidence to support it, and I don't think it scored highly. And you would have heard what I said about it in January, which was minuted and recorded as part of my concerns. That has now gone out to consultation, and I think over 100 comments have come back on it. So with hindsight, I don't think it was the right thing to do. Obviously, the process will now have to conclude. The consultation has concluded, but it just concerns me that reputationally, it's not good for the NEPP, because we're all part of the NEPP, and if we make judgments where it looks like things that shouldn't have gone out do, it brings question to the whole process, and therefore this is a legal, judicious process that parking regulations go through. So I just wanted to bring concern about it, that I hope it never happens again if you are voted on as chair, and I hope there'll be some learnings from it, both personally and professionally, because I don't think it's the shining light of how things should have gone process-wise, and I certainly think it's unsettled that particular community, given the conversations I've had. So I just wanted to put that on record. It's not a personal comment, it's factual, and I hope that there will be some learnings when this proceeds back through this committee later this year, and I do hope that we don't have any more parking schemes anywhere across our area that go through that process again. So I just want that to go on record. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Goss. I think it's only fair. Councillor Honeywood, did you want to make any response before we go to the vote?
Yes, I'm happy to say that I know that how that was dealt with is being raised in today's Have Your Say, and I have prepared a response. Unfortunately, it's a little bit lengthy, but it explains the events as they were seen to me and the reasons that I made the decisions I did. So I hope you'll bear with me, and assuming I'm elected, I will, once we've heard the views of the residents, I will read that out and you can hear my thinking behind why I did what I did. Okay?
Thanks, Councillor Honeywood. So we have a proposed candidate for the chairmanship, seconded. I'll now ask for a show of hands for all who approve the motion for Councillor Honeywood to be elected chairman for the coming year. I make that 5 votes in favour. And if I could have votes against. See, no votes against. And pardon me, apologies. Abstentions. 1 abstention. So I can confirm that Councillor Honeywood has been re-elected as chairman for the coming year. So Councillor Honeywood will now come forward and chair the meeting from this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, thank you for voting me to be chair for the coming year. Hopefully, I'll prove the right decision as we progress through the year. We've covered item 1, which is election of chair. I'll now go to item 2, which is election of vice chair. We need to conduct a vote for each candidate in the order they are nominated themselves until a decision in favour of each candidate. Note, JPC members who are not present can still be nominated by their substitutes or by any other JPC member. So with those facts in mind, could I please ask for nominations, which must be seconded? Mike.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on having another year with us, hopefully. Could I nominate Councillor Neil Hargreaves, please, as Vice Chairman?
Do we have a seconder?
Seconded, Chairman.
Thank you, Graham. Any other nominations? No? Okay then, that's fair enough. So can we see all those in favour?
Sorry, if I could just have a quick show of hands again, sorry. Thank you.
Those against?
None against.
Any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Well, congratulations on your term. Moving to item 3, I'll invite councillors and officers to introduce themselves. So if I start with myself and then move left. My name's Paul Honeywood. I'm here as the Essex County Council representative, but in the interest of clarity, I'm also a tendering district councillor.
Jake England, Interim Head of the North Essex Parking Partnership.
Trevor Degville, Interim Group Operating Manager.
Danielle Wood, Group Development Manager.
Amelia Hoke, Parking Officer for Epping Forest District Council.
Councillor Neil Hargreaves for Uttlesford District Council.
Sarah Lewin, Client Officer for Uttlesford Council.
Andy Napane, Tendering District Council Public Rail Manager.
Mick Barry, I'm the Tendering District Council representative.
I'm Richard Walker, I'm the Client Officer for Colchester.
Martin Goss, I'm the portfolio holder for Colchester.
Dean James, Client Officer for Harlow District Council.
Nikki Pearce, Cabinet Member for Environment, Harlow District Council.
Owen Howell, Democratic Services Officer, Clerks Committee.
Okay, thanks for everyone. The next item is item 4, apologies for absence and substitutions. Councillors will be asked to say if they are attending on behalf of a committee member who is absent. I don't believe that's the case, though.
Sorry, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Ken Williamson, and unfortunately we were not able to find a substitute for today's.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Item 5 is declarations of interest. Are there any interests to be declared? Okay, if anything does come up during the meeting and you feel that it should be declared, please indicate and we'll get that recorded. Item 6 is have your say. This is an opportunity for members of the public or attending councillors, if they wish, to speak either on an item on the agenda or a general matter. It's my understanding that a list of speakers and any statements for the clerk to read out have been given in. I will list those in turn. My intention is to hear all the speakers or statements in turn and then respond to that at the end, and then give officers the opportunity to respond to anything that they would like to add or say. So the order I have in is Nick Chivers in person, Bob Bloomfield, clerk to read statement, Stuart Spindler via Zoom, clerk to read statement, Laura Newman via Zoom, clerk to read statement, Lucas Harrington via Zoom, clerk to read statement, and Councillor Lissimore, who is here in person.
Mr. Chilvers, would you like to come forward? You'll have 3 minutes and a bell will go after 2 and then again after 3.
Good afternoon, thank you, Chairman. I'll plough on in the fashion I intended, although what was mentioned earlier wasn't lost on me. I submitted a written have your say for the November meeting at Uttlesford. That was cancelled and rescheduled to Colchester on the 25th of January. Family reasons I wasn't able to attend, so I listened to it being read out on the audio record and for the reply. And it was about the decision-making process regarding on-street pay to park at Colchester. 420 words of opinion, suggestion and questions. Less than 3 minutes and sent well in advance. Mine was the only have your say. It wasn't frivolous, vexatious, perfectly polite, relevant to the event. It was perfectly polite, relevant to the agenda and answerable. It finished on, I would welcome the Chair and Committee's reaction to my remarks. Well, the reaction from the Chair was, thank you for that. The next item is number 5 on the agenda. No verbal answers, no promise of a written reply, no response at all. It almost looked pre-prepared, as if, well, he isn't here, so say nothing, perhaps he'll go away. Or was it because NEPP doesn't like having its wisdom challenged in a public forum? Is that the new standard for have your say at NEPP meetings? 12 months ago, I was here, asked a question and received an answer. Fair enough? Now, I can accept being told my views are wrong or that I don't understand something, but I do object to being given the brush off. That could be described as shabby at very least. So on past caring about the missing answers, months have passed. My question today is, why didn't the Chair seek a response from somebody amongst the 7 councillors and the 10 officers in attendance? It's a matter of principle. I have to say Colchester Council ordinarily do it much better. What were the grounds for ignoring my submission?
Thank you for your question. As you're probably aware, I wasn't chairing that meeting, so I'm going to ask the officer to respond. I hope that's satisfactory for you.
Mr. Chilvers, I think, I can't speak on behalf of the committee members on why those concerns and have your say was addressed at that point in time. But I'm happy to take away from this meeting a commitment that we'll review the have your say piece and come back to you with some comments from officers and the applicable members. You'll try and get some comments for you on those. In the absence of particularly the have your say piece, I wouldn't be able to comment now, but happy to commit to return to you with a response. I feel like it's up to the joint committee to respond to specifically why it wasn't discussed at that meeting themselves rather than officers.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you copy me in on the response? Thank you very much. Now, the other items are, I believe, all around the same issue, so we'll hear those in turn, and then I'll respond and ask the officers if they have any response to the points raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Apologies, not very much space at this table today. So the first of 4 statements that I'll be reading is from Mr. Bob Bloomfield, who writes, regarding TRO proposed red lines at junction of President Road and Oaklands Avenue. Please can you read this statement out at the NEPP meeting on 19th June under have your say. I write in respect of the above mentioned proposed red lines. I'm concerned about the procedure used to bring this forward, especially as there is hardly any vehicles parked on that junction, so therefore, unlike others in the area, there is no viable need. I am also very concerned that my name was used in a list of people who expressed a wish for the lines, but Solissimo never asked me about the proposal, only the one at the junction of Dugard Avenue. This was at best a poor mistake, and at worst a blatant lie. Mr. Honeywood has told me that this proposal was brought forward by a county councillor, but has not enlightened me to their name. He also stated that there was support for this proposal, which has now proved was based on inaccurate information. The proposal, therefore, should be dropped. The first statement ends. Second statement is from Mr. Stuart Spindler. Apologies, my computer's been very slow bringing things up today. Mr. Spindler writes, please can the following comments be entered into record for the above application, 38 Oaklands Avenue, President Road. We formally object to the full proposal and specifically the section by Oaklands Avenue and President Road. Our road, Oaklands Avenue, is a quiet residential road which currently has no signage or traffic calming measures. The road has no central dividing lines and no parking restrictions. Except during rush hour or peak times due to unforeseen events, the road remains broadly quiet and unassuming. We do not require any red route or junction restrictions by our property. The road does not suffer from any known accident black spots, nor does the accident data support the application. One of the few pieces of data will likely be a stationary RTC, which will have no bearing on this red route. The council point scoring matrix does not support the application, being one of the lowest for the year, and residents do not support the application either. It would be better to apply logic and support an area of Lexington or Prettygate which would benefit from further restrictions. We can recommend King Harold Road by the Community Building or Ambrose Avenue by the Doctors. This application process has been hijacked by two members of the NEPP committee. The Chair, Councillor Paul Honeywood, has enacted executive authority to force through this determination, something which we believe is party political to benefit the Conservatives. Councillor Sue Lissimore has acted without honour by proposing this application without following all reasonable options. We are in receipt of documentation which confirms local residential approval to be lacking at best and false at worst. Please can you follow due process and act within the guidance and spirit of democracy. Thank you. Statement ends. Statement from Ms. Laura Newman. This is in relation to Oaklands Avenue TRO. I read councils and highways meeting minutes, spoke to councillors and submitted FOI requests. All lead me to Sue Lissimore submitted TRO applications around March 2024, but they lacked a resident's petition. NEPP rejected them and asked she obtain the usual necessary petition, and it would not be scored without it. In November, it was on the list, but as promised, didn't get scored. Martin Goss confirmed it wouldn't proceed without following the standard process of gaining a petition. 10 weeks later, it suddenly reappeared with a score of 10 out of 105, marked as priority and pushed forward by the chairman, Paul Honeywood. Paul said that when Martin rejected Sue's proposals, she asked Paul to intervene. This is a deliberate choice to bypass the process and not an oversight. Paul said, I was informed that there was support for this proposal. I asked the officer team to help find a solution to help bring application forward to the publication I asked the officer team to help find a solution to help bring application forward to the public consultation stage in order to help out. Paul told me he sought advice from the legal team, which found a loophole in wording of e.g. instead of i.e., which allowed the TRO to proceed without a petition. It is questionable that Sue's requests were rejected by councillors and NEPP, but then pushed forward by Paul to help out when they are both in the same political party. Legal resources have been used not to clarify policy, but to help a councillor bypass it after proposals were rejected on fair procedural grounds. It was not to serve residents or ensure procedural integrity, but to find a loophole to allow a disqualified scheme to proceed. Exploiting a loophole and then closing it to prevent future use is admission that the process was wrong. It ranked in the bottom 2 out of 26 schemes, and higher scoring, lower costing proposals were deferred or rejected, but ours was singled out to be prioritised, despite being the only one without residents' petition. It was also awaiting funding for 2 ATCs. Highways confirmed none have been done, nor booked for the future. Under NEPP general policy, red route restrictions can only be introduced without resident support if they meet the safety or congestion criteria. Safety criteria say there must be 5 or more personal injury collisions within a 50-metre radius over the past 3 years. Essex Safer Roads map show there have been 3 and unrelated to congestion parking. They occurred within 50 metres of straight road. There have been none that meet the distance criteria on the other 2 junctions within this TRO. Congestion criteria say that parked vehicles must be causing significant delays or blockages to the movement of traffic on PR1 or PR2 roads. President Road is a local road and not connected to the PR1 or PR2 network. It cannot be justified on congestion. No evidence has been provided of congestion, troublesome parking or traffic. President and Oakland are local roads. At this section, neither connects to a PR1/PR2 route. Red lines at this junction would not meet the safety or congestion criteria. We urge the Council to stop this TRO due to the failure in following processes and deliberately bypassing the rules. The residents are not in favour and are disappointed in the behaviour of our councillor, who falsely stated that some specific residents were in support and posted untrue statements on Facebook about these TROs. Ms Newman's statement ends. Apologies to everyone for having to hear my voice for so long. I should have had another coffee before I started. Final statement. This is from Mr. Lucas Harrington. This question concerns the proposed traffic regulation order for all three junctions on Oaklands Avenue. I am deeply concerned and disappointed by what appears to be a deliberate effort to bypass standard democratic public processes and public engagement. It seems that public funds may have been used to seek legal advice with the aim of identifying a technical loophole, rather than following the usual and expected procedures of gathering residents' petitions, conducting surveys, and collecting a current traffic data. This suggests an intent to circumvent both policy and public opinion, which I believe undermines local democracy and public trust. Can the councillors involved please explain, 1, why it was considered appropriate to progress with the TRO proposals without first consulting residents through petitions, surveys or traffic data collection as is normally required by procedure? 2, why public money was seemingly used to instruct a legal team not to ensure legality but to find a loophole in order to avoid engaging with the community and to move forward with a plan that appears to serve specific interests rather than those of the affected residents? 3, how such an action can be justified, particularly when it contradicts the principles of transparency, fairness and public accountability. It appears this loophole was sought, used to justify the order and then promptly closed to prevent its use by others, a troubling sign that this was a one-off manipulation to benefit a councillor or particular agenda. That raises the question, was this decision politically motivated? Finally, how does the council plan to restore public confidence when residents feel excluded from decisions that directly impact their streets and quality of life? Thank you. Statement ends.
Thank you for that. And the final speaker on this is Councillor Lissamore, who is here with us this afternoon.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak here this afternoon. I just wanted to add a little bit of context to the applications that the Pretty Gate team have made, as we fully appreciate that they've had caused some concern. For many years, when residents had come to us with parking issues, we knew the NEPP could not help, as they had told us that they were at full capacity. However, when they opened up applications again in around 2021, we looked at where we had most complaints. That was Baden-Powell Drive. We completed a survey where there appeared to be at least 80% support, which is required by the NEPP, and forwarded details to the officers to complete their due diligence. This was completed and junction protection was installed. We then looked at where else we'd had complaints. We then set about surveying the residents living in the proximity of those junctions as set out by the NEPP. This took the form of door knocking, letters and leaflets. I have one of the letters here, and I think it's pretty fair. It sets out why it's being looked at, what could be installed and what the downside could be. We give email address and phone number so residents have a variety of ways to contact us. We also wrote on our Facebook page, which has over 8,500 members. When we door knocked, we did a number of times, I believe up to 5 times at each site. This was at all different times. I believe we met as many residents as we possibly could, following the recommendations of areas to be covered from the NEPP. This dates back to 2023. We also held street surgeries and forewarned residents. I remember one particular meeting, which was possibly April 22 or 23, when a group of about 8 local residents came out to speak to us to complain about parking at the junctions in Oaklands Avenue. Following extensive door knocking and leafleting on the 20 plus sites that had the most complaints, we believe we had as much information as we were ever going to gather and handed it into the NEPP. However, we heard nothing for a year. After I chased, we were told we had not included a signed petition, so the application was incomplete. However, we had not been asked for a petition and had not done one for the Baden-Powell application, which was successful. I then spoke to the chair of the NEPP, asking why procedure had changed across all our applications. He investigated and concluded that the rules had been adhered to strictly, too strictly. The rules state evidence is required, e.g. a petition. To clarify, there could be other evidence of support of that a petition is only one. If we had been told we needed a petition, we would have done one. We have always listened to residents for their ideas as to what will make an area safer. Rule 250 Highway Code specifically advises parking at least 10 metres away from any junction. However, we are very aware that putting parking restrictions in can have a knock-on effect, something we state in this letter, and we have always listened to the majority of residents. We also explain to residents the NEPP process. It is the NEPP that make the application and do the consultation. They will then assess the best path. We, as ward councillors, have no jurisdiction nor receive any benefits from the NEPP installing junction protection. We just want an area to be as safe as possible. Thank you.
Thank you for that. As mentioned previously, I have drawn up a response which I intend to read out. Unfortunately, as I said before, it is a little bit long, and to make it even more unfortunate, I'm not as good as reading aloud as my council official here, but I will respond. I would like to thank everyone who has taken the time to put forward their views this afternoon. I'm sure NEPP members and officers will take these into consideration. However, I would like to take this opportunity to explain the reasons for reaching my conclusions and respond to some of the comments made. In 2024, I was indeed contacted by Councillor Lissamore, who expressed her concerns around the way applications she had submitted were being handled. It was confirmed to me that in March 2024, Councillor Lissamore had provided the NEPP with the names and addresses of the residents that had been contacted and their views on the proposals. The majority were in favour. In October 2024, Councillor Lissamore was informed that at the NEPP meeting, due to be held on 14th November, the applications would be recorded in the reports, but as additional residential support, petitions, etc., were not provided with the applications, they had not been scored, as they did not meet the scoring criteria set out in the NEPP policies. Therefore, it was unlikely that they would be approved by the committee. On 11th November 2024, Councillor Lissamore highlighted to me that the policy criteria asks for evidence the scheme has local support, e.g. petition. It did not say only a petition will do. In the days approaching the postponed 14th November meeting, I raised this with the then head of NEPP. My concerns were around the wording of the TRO policy and the use of the abbreviation EG instead of IE, as the policy clearly stated the requirement for the pre-scoring criteria. And to read from that, it says, pre-scoring criteria, local support must be obtained to proceed. Scheme is supported by relevant parties affected, e.g. resident and business petitions available to evidence this. The different meaning of the two abbreviations meant that the wording of the TRO policy and what had been its intended meaning differed. The difference had, in my view, led to confusion on the issue of whether a petition was required for an application to be scored, or whether it was simply an example of evidence that could be provided but was not a necessity. I thought it best to have this clarified within the policy, so everyone knows where they stand and prevent it happening again. At the 23rd January 2025 meeting, the agenda contained a report, updated traffic regulation order and application decision report. This report contains slight variations that altered the TRO policy so that the wording and the intention of the policy matched. The policy now specifically states that if a petition is not received, officers are unable to score the proposal. Returning to Councillor Lissamore's situation, she had confirmed to me that, quote, we had sent in vast amounts of evidence and door-knocked / lettered residents around 6 times, unquote. In my view, asking any councillor, whatever their political persuasion, to go around yet again and ask residents about the same issue and then sign a petition this time would be unfair under the circumstances. Therefore, I asked if there was a way residents could have their say and the matter resolved. The report produced differed from the usual report. In addition to the proposals from member authorities, it also put forward for approval by the committee the 2 proposals that had been made by Councillor Lissamore as Essex County Council proposals. After a debate, which is shown in the minutes to the meeting, the proposals were approved by the Joint Committee. This does not mean the proposals would be implemented. It means they would go out to consultation so that residents could have their say one way or the other. In closing, the application process has not, in my view, been hijacked, and the determination was not forced through. It was put before the committee in accordance with the rules, as can be seen in the minutes. No loophole was sought, then promptly closed. A problem was identified with the policy, which has now hopefully been closed to prevent reoccurrence in the future. My decision was not politically motivated. I would have done the same for any councillor or member of the public who had approached me in these circumstances. I know how I would have felt if I had to go back to residents and ask the same question for the umpteenth time and say this time you need to sign the petition as well. In fact, I have spent time helping to ensure proposals put forward by councillors with different political views to my own would be heard at this meeting today. This committee should not be about party politics, in my view. I will now ask officers if they have any comments to make. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for everyone for the statements today. Just from an officer perspective, I've prepared a couple of comments. I just want to make the point that the Joint Committee members have been familiar with, will be familiar with this policy and process now. It's been around for a number of years. It's been developed by the NEPP, led by Richard, because there wasn't really a standard in the sector. And it was developed by officers, NEPP officers, along with the various Joint Committee members that we've had across the years. For over a decade, just to remember, the NEPP has been around for over a decade now. It's fair to say this was the first time this particular issue was raised, and following discussions between NEPP officers and the chair, the decision was made, one, to propose to correct the policy as intended, and that was approved at the January 2025 meeting. But secondly, that the chair would then propose those particular schemes as Essex schemes rather than Colchester's. And as it's been stated the decisions made at the January meeting were made by the Joint Committee. What happened then to follow was they went to formal consultation, as most members in the room will know, whereby objections can then be submitted by members of the public, residents, businesses, anyone else. And due to the nature of those objections that have been received, they now sit by powers delegated by this joint committee. They now sit with me pending a review. So no decision has been made at this point in time. They are for me to review, and to be transparent, there are three options. I allow them to continue, I stop them in their tracks, or I ask that they come back to the committee for a decision. Bearing in mind that it's not just this scheme or the two schemes that were approved by the committee to go to formal consultation, there are other schemes as well in the mix here that were proposed by Colchester. So, that report is with me, pending a review by myself, and I intend to review and come to a decision of that next week. And whatever that decision is, I'll then make sure it's communicated clearly with all. I think it'd be fair to communicate it to all joint committee members, but especially the Colchester member, especially the chair. I think that's all of my comments on that one, but happy to take any follow-up questions from any joint committee members.
Do we have any questions from anyone? Okay, thank you very much. We look forward to hearing from you in the future. Moving to item 7, to approve as a correct record the draft minutes of the joint committee meeting held on 21st of March 2024. Do I have a proposer for that, please? Thank you, Neil. A second? I'm sorry, I can't second, I wasn't there. Okay,
second them as a true record, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. Can we have a show of hands, those that in favour?
4 in favour.
4 in favour. Against? Abstentions? I'll need to abstain because obviously I wasn't there. Thank you. Item 8, urgent items. The joint committee will consider any urgent items of business raised. Do we have any? We have none on this occasion. I'll now move to item 9, NEPP financial update 24-25 financial outturn. On pages 15 to 18. This report updates members on finance. The presenting officer via Zoom is Paul Atkinson, Interim Director of Finance.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies for not being able to be there in person today in Colchester. I've just got some personal issues to deal with. I'll give you a summary of the report, which is covering the financial outturn position for NEPP for the year to the 31st of March 2025, and what that means for the NEPP reserve balance. So the outturn position for the year overall was a surplus of 118,000, which is circa £12,000 above the assumed surplus of 106,000 at the start of the year. That surplus restores the balances, the reserve balance, to a positive position. So we move from a circa 39,000 deficit at the start of the year to 79,000 at the moment. This reserves balance is projected to increase to around 143,000 by the 31st of March next year. Compared to opening budgets, there was an overspend of 127,000 on expenditure items, and an over recovery on income of 124,000. Looking at expenditure first, significant variances within that 127k overspend was an overspend of 168,000 on data-led services. Obviously, members will be aware that there was no budget set for this for the year, and the activity to complete the restructure and remove that DLS team was expected to conclude in 23-24. So as a result of an extended staff consultation, some of the expenditure moved into 24-25, and the costs in there are mostly related to those restructuring costs. So it's things like notice periods and severance and covering pension costs. The bad debt provision ended up £117,000 higher than planned. I think this was the first year in which the provision had been built into the budget. But essentially PCN issuance and have increased over the year, especially around year end. I think levels are higher than anticipated, and therefore there's been an increase in bad debt provision against that. Offsetting those overspends, we saw an underspend on civil enforcement officers and supervision, and that's primarily due to performance management, attrition, and ongoing challenges around recruitment. So there's an average of 7.5% vacancy throughout the year. There are also other smaller variances on expenditure of a circa £40,000 overspend on back office costs, which were incurred primarily before the new org structure was implemented last year. Looking at income budgets, variances, there was an additional 102,000 income on parking permits and season tickets. That is due to the increase in charges agreed by this committee, I believe, last July. 46,000 under recovery of income on parking charges and other fees linked to some pay and display sites not being in operation for the full year. And then there was a £67,000 over recovery across other areas. That includes additional income for TRL works and some one-off income from local authorities, and that was partially offset by a shortfall on penalty charge notice income for the year. That is the summary I was going to give. Obviously, happy to take any questions. I think main message is that it's positive that the reserve balance has moved back into positive territory. We presented the budget at the last meeting for the current year, and at the moment that looks fairly robust budget. So I'm confident that the surplus that we've got forecast this year will be achievable, but obviously there will be variances along the way. So any questions, Chair? I'm happy to take them.
Hello, thank you for that presentation. Do we have any questions? Mick?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Paul. That's a very helpful explanation around the report. And can I just say from my authority's position, I think last year we were almost budgeting to put forward a proposal to leave the NEPP because of the budget issues and the uncertainties around it. And I think over the course of the year, the meetings of the 151 officers and the clarity and transparency around the budgeting has been really, really helpful. And as someone who has been fairly critical, I suppose, in the past, I'll just say welcome this report and the appendix here, and certainly the the surplus is a very welcome move in the right direction. So thank you very much to you and to all the officers for that performance. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, and it would be remiss of me not to note our finance officer who does an excellent job, and Louise who isn't here today to present. But thank you. I'll pass that feedback on to her as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other Questions for Anne? Nikki?
I've just got a few questions here. Thank you for the presentation of the report, and also again to echo the words there. You know, while we have a headline of a surplus, it is a welcome and it is welcome. The overspend and reserve position tell much more of a fragile story that shouldn't really be overlooked. But I have a few questions regarding. Actually, we saw that in the report we saw there's a 7.5 vacancy factor across the CEO and supervision team. What is the plan to stabilise the frontline staffing, and how soon will this be delivered?
Yeah, I think I'll obviously refer that to more operational colleagues if not really want to feel.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, very valid question, Councillor Pearce. Thank you for raising it, because it does give me a bit of an opportunity to elaborate on that particular point. So you'll note from the report that it was an approximate average across the year. What that doesn't say is that actually that there was peaks and drops across the year, and thankfully towards the end of that financial year was the peak and continues to be the peak. So whilst we had at various points a drop in CEO provision, actually we're in a really good territory right now. That partly comes from, as has been mentioned by Paul, more effective performance management, but also the reality of the day and age that we're in, pay, which was negotiated by Colchester City Council towards the end of the year, and a decision towards the very end of the financial year made, which had a positive impact, if I put myself in a CEO's shoes, a positive impact on take-home pay for those that was ultimately backdated to the beginning of the year, and has subsequently attracted a lot of attention into that frontline post. It is a difficult job, very difficult job, and thankfully a lot of the managers within the NEPP have done that job themselves and are very sympathetic towards our frontline staff. It would be remiss of me not to plug in the Beyond the Uniform campaign, which we've been piloting in the last few months, and which we intend to try and keep going, but also across all other areas, in addition to Harlow District. But sometimes can be a really thankless task, and when that salary isn't quite right, I think the result that we see is a lack of interest. But I'm really pleased to say that I think we're at a good point right now, and I hope that continues going forwards. The pay salaries isn't negotiated by me, but I'm hopeful that we can continue that going ahead. And just to give some reassurances beyond just anecdotal reassurances, the latest recruitment and selection drive for CEOs saw a return of nearly pre-COVID levels of civil enforcement officers. We're talking sort of 30 applications, 40 applications coming in across the whole partnership area, not just Colchester, which seems to be the more popular. So we are certainly getting the attention again. It allows us to be a lot more confident in us sitting here and saying, actually, I think we're in a stable point this year, and as long as we can continue that pace, we will be in future as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Does anyone else have any questions?
Can I support the comments that have been made? A big thank you to the officers for turning around both the annual and the reserves. Note that painful decisions have had to be taken to do this, and we thank for those who took those decisions and the people who moved elsewhere. Thank you for that. I would just say, note also Nikki Pearce's comment about the fragility, that the ins and outs are actually greater than the reserve figure and the surplus. So eternal vigilance. I would just suggest, whenever I see any of the enforcement officers about, I always go and have a word with them, ask how they are, and it's a bit of encouragement, just to try and well, first of all, if they've got any issues they want to be raised, which generally they don't, but just encourage them in their work and just make sure they carry on doing the job and perhaps get other people to do the job, so we can all do our bit if we come across them. Hopefully not actually just for the purpose of sticking a ticket.
Thanks. Okay, thank you for that. Any other comments? Okay, I noticed the recommended decision, which is on page 15, is that the Joint Committee is asked to note the outturn for 2024-25 and the impact of the parking reserve balance. Are we happy to do that? Okay, agreed?
Just get a show of hands, please.
A show of hands, please.
Unanimous, thank you.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Shall now move to item 10, annual governance review and internal audit. This is pages 19 to 32. The report considers the governance review and internal audit of the North Essex Parking Partnership for the year 2024/25. The presenting officer is Hayley McGrath, Corporate Governance Manager. So welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Hello to members and officers that I haven't met before. As Chair said, my name is Hayley. My role at Colchester is Governance and Deputy Monitoring Officer, but I also manage the process for you as the Joint Committee. So I have a slightly different hat on. I don't have my Colchester hat, I have my hat of supporting you in terms of making sure that the governance arrangements for the partnership are sound. And obviously we've had a lot of discussions already this afternoon about governance areas, and they are issues that I have spoken to both Jake and Richard about in terms of pulling together the report to understand some of the issues and concerns during the year. You don't have to produce a governance review as a joint committee, but it's considered good practice. So I report to you each year in terms of any issues or concerns that have been raised. Always during the year, you have an opportunity to contact me directly if you have concerns as a partner authority. I've had no contact this year, which is nice. It is nice to hear from you as well. So there has been no issues raised directly with myself or the monitoring officer here at Colchester. And I haven't heard of any issues from any of the other audit managers or monitoring officers in the partner authorities. I think the items that I've set out in the report are ones that you've already spoken about today in terms of the issues under Have Your Say and also under the finance report. I think we did pull out the fact that there has been a turnaround on the finances at year end. I hadn't seen the final figures, but we were anticipating a surplus on the reserve fund, which is obviously a good move forward from last year. I mean, with the traffic regulation orders, technically speaking, without a surplus of 400,000 on the reserves, there is that opportunity not to carry out any of those. But as part of providing a good service, you've carried on doing that. I have no concerns with that happening during the year from a governance point of view. So overall, what I would say is there are adequate systems of control in place in the North Essex Parking Partnership during 24-25. That has also been supported by the internal audit review. And what happens with the partnership is a full audit is carried out every other year whilst you maintain a reasonable or substantial assurance rating. The last one was in December 22, and that completed as a reasonable, so there was no need to do a full audit last year. So this year, in February 25, a full audit was carried out. The results of that audit is Appendix 2. There was just 2 recommendations that came out of that audit. One of those was about reviewing the competitiveness of the cash collection arrangements, and that's primarily at Colchester. So that's an issue for the parking representative for Colchester Takeaway to consider how we at Colchester manage our cash collection processes. And what I would say is technically under procurement procedure rules, it's an ongoing contract that should have been put out to tender, but cash is no longer used to the extent that it has done previously. So the likelihood is that going out to a tender, there is not many organisations that will collect cash these days, and it's not likely to return any benefit, and we now need to consider whether we go to cashless parking. The other item that was identified was literally an update of the civil enforcement discretion and PCN cancellation policy on the website, which has been completed, and I've confirmed that. So all in all, it's a very good report. I have no concerns, but obviously open to any questions.
Do we have any questions? Neil?
First of all, just a comment, paragraph 4.6 notes that we are operating UTROs contrary to our agreement. That's a later item in the agenda, but we have now got it in the governance review that we're operating contrary to the agreement, which obviously we can resolve. There's a question. It's on about the, it's on page 31. It says 7,064 PCNs valued at 124,000 were passed to bailiffs for a period of 8 months, it looks like. It doesn't say what that percentage is of the total. I compared that with the financial figures. It looked to me like that was a very high percentage, but it didn't seem plausible to me. So it would be useful to know what percentage of the total that is. But secondly, it said of the 124,000 passed to bailiffs, in the same period we only recovered 13,000. Now maybe that's what normally happens, but again that seems odd to have that amount to be recovered and then only recovering a small amount. So two questions there. What is the percentage, and what is that the normal sort of thing you'd expect in moving to bailiffs?
With regards to those questions, that's not information that I would have to hand in terms of the work that I've done, but I don't know whether Jake would have any updated information on that.
Yeah, fair to say that I don't have the percentage in my mind, but we can certainly calculate that for you. And in terms of benchmarking, then equally we can reach out to some contacts that we have both at the South Essex Parking Partnership and also our neighbours on the northern border as well within Suffolk. It's fair to say though that there is a law of diminishing returns the further you go through the PCN notice processing procedure. So at the point of enforcement agents and the recovery of any outstanding debt, it is going to be quite slim. There are other steps that we could do beyond a PCN warrant, of which we're actually actively in discussion at the moment and are preparing a business case to be considered. There are lots of avenues we could take after that point, which could help improve PCN recovery. There are some other steps that we could take prior to debt registration or warrant registration that we could take, and I won't necessarily bore you with all of that. I'll just ask that we've got the business case coming. We do intend to bring it back to committee for some decisions, because there is going to be some tough decisions, I think, to be made on what services perhaps we might want to start doing or not doing. Yeah, but the percentage for now, happy to find that. Happy to also get in contact with, our neighbours and get some benchmarking statistics.
Thank you. And my apologies for not asking the question at a much earlier stage, because normally when they come to me like in detail, I say, it would be nice if you told me a few days before and I would have got the answers for you. So apologies for that.
Okay. Do we have any other questions? Nikki?
I've got 3 questions that I'd like to ask. How does NEPP monitor and ensure independence in the audit process, particularly when we see audits are carried out via Colchester, which is the host for NEPP? That's my first one. What formal feedback mechanism exists for partners to raise concerns during the governance review process, if at all? What was my third one? Have all the joint committee members had the opportunity to review and challenge the effectiveness of the governance before noting this report?
Thank you. So in terms of the independence in the auditing process, totally understand the point that it's Colchester that does the auditing. However, our internal audit service is provided by an external company. So it's not council officers that do the auditing. It's a company by the name of TIA, and they have criteria for the audit, and we don't influence that. So they are auditing NEPP. There is also the opportunity for all the other audit managers of the partners to raise any issues or concerns, and it has been known previously that they will raise concerns with me. We're part of the audit network, so I do meet with them during the year on a regular basis. So they know that there is an opportunity to raise issues. We have had it with one of the other partners last year, nothing this year. So in terms of partners being able to raise concerns, the process is that I am available. I do report regularly to this committee, so standing members will have seen me before. They will have heard me speak. I also meet with the client officers, so as part of the process of the effectiveness of the review. At the client officer meeting, there are discussions, so I bring the report to client officers prior to coming to committee, and this is an opportunity for the committee to have that robust conversation about the effectiveness. This is my opinion as an audit manager in terms of, or a governance manager in terms of the effectiveness. That doesn't mean that the committee have to accept that. They can raise issues and concerns, and they can put their own notes to that if they want to. As I say, this isn't a return that goes into your accounts. And most of you will probably be aware at your own authorities you have something called the annual governance statement that supports your statement of accounts each year, and that will include any issues or concerns that you have from a governance point of view in your organisations. In Colchester's annual governance statement, we highlight the North Essex Parking Partnership as a partnership that we are involved in, and in our governance statement we would raise any concerns there if as a partner we had any issues with the partnership. You are able to do that in your own organisations, and a copy of the audit report can go out to your auditors to give them assurance of part of your annual governance statements as well.
Anything else? No? Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? Okay. The recommendation is on page 19, which the joint committee is requested to note the annual governance review of the North Essex Parking Partnership and consider the progress on implementing internal audit recommendations for the North Essex Parking Partnership. Do we have any comments, views on that? Are we happy to accept that? And I assume we need a show of hands? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I'm now up to item 11, annual review of risk assessment. That's pages 35 to 50. The report concerns the risk management strategy and current strategic risk register for the partnership. The presenting officer is Hayley McGrath again, corporate governance manager. So over to you.
Sorry about that, Chair. Yeah, the other part of my role, so the governance report looks back over the year in terms of how the partnership has operated. The other part of what I do is looking forward to what's coming and trying to identify or support you in identifying the risks that lie ahead in terms of operation of the service. My role is to support you as the joint committee. The risk register that's in front of you is owned by yourselves. This is your risk register. So if there's changes that you want to be made to it, that is entirely your decision. I have put some recommendations that I think you could consider. These have been discussed by the client officers as well prior to this meeting, and some changes were made to my original recommendations following that client officer meeting. Took some of those comments on board. So for you today, it's about having that review of what you think the strategic risks to the delivery of the service are. So operational risks like the health and safety, employee risks, etc., are managed internally by the service. And these ones in front of you are the strategic risks, the things that could really impact the partnership itself and whether it can deliver the services that you require. Whilst not necessary, we also do an annual review of your risk management strategy. Again, there's no legislative requirement for you to have your own strategy. However, it's good practice that just sets out for anybody who's interested in terms of how you manage risk and your approach to risk going forwards. So in terms of the strategy, I'll deal with that one first. There's no particular changes that I would recommend being made to it. The process is one that is reviewed by our internal auditors, by Colchester's internal auditors. It mirrors in a lot of detail the process that we use here at Colchester. And then in terms of the register, at section 5, I've set out some changes that I would recommend that you consider. As I say, they're not changes I'm saying they must happen, but I would advise you to consider whether you want to make those changes. And going through them in order, I'm recommending reducing the score of 1.3, the change of political will of a partner, from an impact of 4 to 3, so reducing the overall score from an 8 to 6. And this is on the basis that we've heard some of those conversations already in terms of the performance of the partnership during the year. So I think that risk may have come down slightly. I've also looked at score 1.21 where I'm saying potentially increasing the score. It's the insufficient investment in embedding innovative technology, easy to say, from a probability of, to a probability of 3 from a 2. And that's because it is getting harder to be able to find the funding, to be able to invest in that technology. And that technology really is critical for delivery of services as you go forward. The digital technology is changing so quickly that it's quite difficult to keep up with that. So I think there is a bit of an increased risk there. I'm suggesting that the risk 1.23 is removed, so council contributions are not rising sufficiently. I'm not saying remove it totally, I'm saying that I think you could replace it with a new revised risk at 1.29, and I'll go on to that one in a minute. Again, reducing the score of 1.25, inability to sustain return from a deficit, from a probability of a 3 to a 2. And that's on the basis that at the moment, that return from a deficit is showing, but obviously you need a sustained period of delivering that return from a deficit before you could remove that risk. But at the moment, I think the risk is lower than it was this time last year. Reducing the score of 1.27, the difficulty in recruiting frontline staff. We've heard from Jake earlier about the CEOs, and actually we've been able to have a really good recruitment campaign. The actual number of CEOs is good at this point in time. Again, it's not about removing it because it needs to be a sustained period of being able to demonstrate that it's not just a one-off, but I would recommend reducing it. Obviously, 5.19, I would suggest a new risk at 1.28, the one that we haven't had on there before, which is the impact of local government reorganisation. Obviously, we don't know the details of that yet. We don't know what the overall position is going to be, but that is something that will impact the partnership in the near future in terms of once those final decisions go in and we have a decision from government about where we're going. So I think it's probably a wise idea to have that recognised on there. That will change over time as those details come out. And the new risk that I'm proposing at 1.29 is the economic environment results in an inability to cover service delivery costs, which captures a bit more specific detail than 1.23, which is about council contributions not rising sufficiently. And I'm open to any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. Do we have any questions? I have Barry and Nikki.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome this sort of anticipated risk assessment updates on the LGR and the costs, covering the costs of the partners. But on the LGR one, as you rightly point out, things are changing daily almost. But what you've put in one of your control measures there, of proposals, is that to ensure lessons learned from other authorities who've already been through the process are built into our service or service planning. And it's just a point of information really, in terms of what are there other authorities that operate their parking controls and partnerships along the same lines as Essex does, for instance. And I think generally LGR, there's a lot to be learned from other authorities, but there seems to be very little information from other authorities coming forward to learn from. So I just wondered how you felt that we might be able to learn from other authorities and what measures you would be taking to do that.
Absolutely. At this point in time, I have to be honest, I don't know if the others that have been through it have the same arrangements as Essex in terms of parking provision. But the whole LGR process and the risks around it are something that I'm working on quite heavily for Colchester. So I will be pulling together some details. There are other authorities where I've got the case studies across the country that have been through the process. And what I will do is bring together a bit of a briefing paper. And if I bring that forward for 6 months' time, when we know a little bit more, I will give you a briefing in risk specifically related to LGR, if that's what you would like.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be really useful, because hopefully it ties in with a review of the contracts and the agreements that we have. If we do move that forward, then we hopefully would be in a position to withstand the vagaries of LGR and carry on, hopefully, business as usual as best we can.
Would you like to comment?
Yeah, if I can just perhaps elaborate on Haley's point, Councillor Barry, I think you're quite right to question it. And NEPP and SEP and what we've got going on in Essex, I'm led to believe is quite unique and doesn't exist in many other places in England. And I'm looking over to current president of the British Parking Association, but also man of many years of experience within the sector, to maybe put him on the spot and ask if he's aware of any other authorities delivering a similar arrangement. But I'm led to believe there's only two that they're in this county. So yeah, something for us to consider. But Richard,
Would you like to comment?
Yeah, we're pioneering in this, in that we've been doing this for 15 years now, before unitary authorities in their current flavour even thought about. So we've been pushing the boundaries. We're trying to be a unitary, and what we're doing with the two partnerships in Essex, really, you've devolved counties' functions down to district levels for them to be delivered with the district's functions, and that's what unitary authority is trying to do, isn't it? Trying to put them both together. There are other partnerships, but they're not of the same sort of flavour. I think there's a Notts, Derby and, which way does it go? Leicestershire, I think, enforcement partnership. There's a back office partnership in North Wales. There's a Shropshire partnership of some sort. And Wychhaven look after 4 or 5 neighbouring authorities, but it's not the same sort of thing as we do here, with absolutely everything to do with parking put into one place. And of course, come local government reorganisation, it'll just make things simpler for us, because we won't need this joint committee and members from different authorities sitting on it. We will be one authority. That's the beauty of unitary authorities, isn't it? So we've been sort of pushing the boundaries. That's sort of an oxymoron on those terms, isn't it? Pulling the boundaries together in a new way. That's, you know, now unitary authorities trying to do the same thing. So yes, you might report up to a committee as officers, but it'll be to one authority at long last, some might say.
Are you happy with that, mate? Okay, thank you. Nikki?
I was trying to keep up with your points on today. So, risk 1.21, insignificant investment in technology. has increased again. And are there any budgetary provisions aligned to that risk?
With regards to budgetary provision, I wouldn't know the answer, but officers may well do.
You able to help with that one?
Yep, so another good question, which thankfully I've got the answer to, I think. In short, yes, but no, and I will explain. We have increased budgets in some real critical business areas, and some of those budgets, or most of those budgets, do include in buying new innovative equipment by its nature of it being new. For example, our civil enforcement officers, they're using handhelds that are long past their shelf life. And we've been using them, keeping good care of them, thankfully, and using them for a very long time now. But we do need some new handhelds. They're starting to die off. We can't repair them because they are old stock. So in that sense, yes, we do have an increase in budget for equipment like that, which is essential and critical. However, there's plenty more that we could be doing, and AI, dare I say it, I know it's a buzzword nowadays, but is coming in and is hitting the sector, parking sector itself. And there could be opportunities to make efficiencies, which would require fairly significant investment if we wanted to go down that route. I think machine learning is the more psychologically friendly terminology, but AI is here. So, we are doing some stuff this year, or we'll be doing some stuff this year, but there's plenty more to be doing, and the longer we leave it, the more outdated we become and the more behind we get. And if we want to propel the parking enforcement service or parking management service into LGR and be this beacon that is just self-sustaining, then we do need to keep up with the times. So that's not to say we're not actively working on business cases internally, because we will be doing that. But yeah, we obviously can't afford everything. And that's the concern, that's the risk.
Thank you. Would you like to come back?
Yeah, I just have one more. So thank you for the answer. Got one more question, which is risk 1.25, inability to sustain a return from the deficit has been lowered due to a positive outturn. Is this not premature given the medium-term forecast?
I think it's relevant in terms of the position from this time last year, which is when it was increased because of the financial situation we were in. So I think it's relevant to reduce it down in recognition of the work is taking place. There is an outturn that is positive, and that's why it's not being taken out, though, and it's not being reduced any further, because it has to be sustained. So it's one that will be monitored during the year. So the risk register, whilst I report to you every year, so I bring it to you as an item every year, does come back in 6 months' time as a verbal update in terms of risk, and it's one that you can look at again then if you want to. But the choice is yours. If you feel it's too early as a committee to reduce that risk down, you're more than entitled to keep it as it is. This is just a recommendation for consideration.
Thank you. Any further questions?
So last one, this again may well be very premature. Are there any contingency plans in place for the newly added risk of LGR?
I think probably the honest answer to that is no at this point in time, and I think it's something that's probably the same across most authorities at the minute. There is a lot of work going on in each authority that is looking at risks and trying to understand what is going on. Contingency at the moment is difficult in terms of until we know exactly what we're facing. But for the partnership, no, we haven't had that conversation about what the fallback position is. That is something that I will work with Jake and our client manager as we go forwards to look at the impact that it will have from a risk point of view, and I will report that back to you later on in the year.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay. Does anyone else have any? Neil?
Yes, thank you. I've read through the modifications that you wish to make. These are all judgment matters. They all seem pretty reasonable to me, so I say it's a yes. One area possibly perhaps to look at for next time, cyber attack. And I'm guessing that the overall IT systems, probably that is with Colchester's risk review, but NEPP has obviously specific stuff that will belong to NEPP. We saw what happened with Marks and Spencer's, out of action, major parts out of action for weeks and weeks on end. Actually on the radio coming along here today, listening to IT managers from the post office talking about how they had an engineering attack which stopped all their sorting machinery. So it wasn't a grabbing of emails, it actually stopped them working. So obviously looking at whether there's a mitigation plan where core activities like issuing the PCNs can, if say systems are out for a month, 6 weeks, those activities can continue on paper. Obviously they used to be done on paper, and whether those tests are done to show, okay, today we're going to test this, you do this without the system, whether it actually will work. Maybe that's something that's my council has just upgraded its IT security. The report was we have 500,000 access requests a week. Of those to the systems, of those, several thousand per day are blocked by the system as unknown or suspicious. Mostly bots, robotic, computer stuff, just digging in. So it's a continual battle, and only one's got to get through.
Absolutely. Cyber risk from the City Council's point of view is one of our key strategic risks. So on our Colchester Strategic Risk Register, cyber is up there as side by side with LGR at the moment in terms of impacts and unknowns. There is a lot of work that goes on in terms of cyber protection within Colchester, and the NEPP systems form part of that. But yes, you do have some specific items within your service area. Now that falls under our business continuity plans. So every service, including NEPP at Colchester, has their own business continuity plan, and that's very much that fallback position of if it goes down, if there's no IT available, if we can't do things, how do we carry on delivering our services? So that's a matter that our resilience officer works with Jake in terms of looking at what's the likely things that will happen and how do we manage those scenarios when they do. And obviously from your point of view as a joint committee, it probably is something that you want to consider moving on to. This is basically your strategic risk register. It's operationally, it's managed by the service on the operational risk register, but that is definitely something we can consider including.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments, questions? Okay then, so the recommended decision, which is on page 35, the joint committee is requested to endorse the risk management strategy for 2025-26 and agree the strategic risk register, subject to any requested amendments. Are we all happy with that? And I think the gentleman on my right will want to show our hands on this one, so if we could.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that. Right. Would members like to take a 10-minute comfort break, or are you happy to proceed? Okay, we'll keep going. We're up to item 12, Traffic Regulation Order Application Decision Report, Tendring District Council, which is on pages 51 to 54. This report seeks decisions to either approve, defer or reject traffic regulation order proposals from the list of applications that have been received from the areas in the tendering district. The presenting officer is Trevor Degville, Interim Group Operating Manager. So...
Hi, yeah, I think that's changed since I've come back from maternity. I'm presenting this one now. So yeah, this is the Tendring District TRO decision report. This was deferred at the January 2025 committee meeting for a decision at a future meeting. So we're bringing that back today for your consideration. So as usual, what we're looking for today is a decision on whether to approve, defer or reject the 4 schemes that are listed in the amended Appendix A. So for clarity, for anyone who hasn't seen the amended version, this includes 4 schemes with the provisional decision to approve 3 of those and to reject 1.
Do we have any comments or questions? Martin?
Given the controversy of earlier, are the experts on the local area, i.e. yourself or Mick, are you happy that these are all good and bona fide? Any concerns?
Yeah, but we have consulted with local ward members and adjacent ward members. All petitions have been submitted and all decisions have been published.
Perfect answer, thank you.
So do we have any other questions? Okay, so I think we have 3 down for approval and 1 for rejection. Are we happy with that? And I imagine once again we'll need a show of hands.
I make that, sorry, I'm having a senior moment. Unanimous, Mr Chairman, and I just wanted to point out that is a decision taken on the amended appendix rather than the one that was originally included. Okay.
Thank you very much, everyone. We're now on item 13, NEPP Joint Committee Agreement 2022 as amended, draft version 4, which is on pages 55 to 114. This report seeks to update the North Essex Partnering Partnership Joint Committee on the proposal to amend the current agreement and agree to send the proposal to Essex County Council's Legal Department for consideration. The presenting officer is Jake England, Interim Head of NEPP.
Thank you, Chair. So I think it's fair to say that there's been some scrutiny around the agreement for one reason or another for a couple of years. I think what principally started it was our financial situation. So I won't go into absolutely everything. I've tried to summarise the most recent activity within the report. The most recent activity being the January 2025 Joint Committee meeting. We know that a formal report was taken recommending that the discussion around the agreement and what each authority feels like could or should change and what that would change to. It was recommended within that report that that discussion is delegated to client officers alongside NEPP officers. That decision recommendation wasn't agreed, and since then some members have been leading the work in the background. Whilst I wasn't there, the March 2025 Joint Committee meeting, there was no formal report there on the topic, but I'm also led to believe it was discussed, and there were some concerns raised from some Joint Committee members, of which those that are leading the work on the amendment to the agreement have since then come back and addressed some of that feedback, all of that feedback. I believe some Joint Committee members want to come in to expand upon that a bit further, but what I will say before we get into that is to clarify what could happen off of the back of this from a governance perspective. Just reiterate it because it's been out here in the public forum before. So if the recommendation today is agreed and it's agreed to go to Essex County Council's legal team for consideration, and if they decide to agree with it within principle, what would then happen is that amendment would then go to each partner authority for consideration of each cabinet, and all 7 partners will have to unanimously agree to all of the changes for that agreement to finally then be, from a legal perspective, be able to be implemented. So whilst there's the obvious observation to make here is that we only need a supermajority for it to be pushed towards Essex County Council's legal team. However, I would recommend that all joint committee members are on board with whatever is presented to them. Otherwise, it's going to fall on its face inevitably. And my final comment from and on behalf of NEPP officers is we will perform to the current agreement and any amendment that comes in. But I would just ask from the committee that we have some clarity whether that and a decision, and whether that's we leave the agreement as it is and we perform to that, or we change it and we give advice and recommend on what we feel could change. Then we will also entertain that as well. But from an officer perspective, and it's probably the same in a lot of your officers within your own authorities, a lack of clarity right now doesn't help with LGR on the horizon. So that's my pleas on behalf of the officers and myself.
Thank you for that. Do we have any questions? It's Martin.
So I don't have any issue with this, and I think it's a convoluted, complex process that's going to take a long time to put through the machine. I think that's one of the concerns, and with LGR coming, and elections likely to be, I guess, May 2027, when this group of people will disappear and reappear somewhere else probably. I don't have a problem with trying to push through changes if people have real concerns, but LGR and Essex County Council in particular and their legal team is rather light on resources, and I doubt this is going to be top of their priority list. So it may just get stuck on a spike and may go nowhere, because without Essex Legal Services looking at it and it going through the Essex machine, that's before it's even gone through 7 other machines and on to cabinets to agree or disagree. And just one dissension from anybody will throw it under the bus. So by the time we've done this, and there's a cost to all that, don't forget, it's not a physical cost, but it's officer time of a lot of people. That's quite a big cost potentially, a cost of sticking it through cabinet meetings, etc. And by the time all that happens, I suspect we'll be much further into merging councils and marrying Tendering and Braintree and divorcing Essex. So I think there just has to be some reality around the speed of this, and also the cost, because the one thing we've not mentioned in any of this is the cost of changing it. Even though we're not using external barristers, although whether Essex Legal Services do, they may well outsource some of their legal services because they're so finite. I have a court case with them coming up again shortly as well over a pothole, so I'm looking forward to that, but we'll see how they perform on that. But that's just my thoughts.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or thoughts? Neil?
Just to answer the question about Essex Legal, I contacted Paul Turner and Richard did as well, and I sent him basically copy of it, basically what the brief was. Answer was, yes, I will deal with it. And then went back a second time and said, but there could be variations on what yes means. Does yes mean yes in principle, but somewhere down? And he came back straight away and said, if requested, I will deal with it. So we've actually got 3 yeses from the guy in charge saying, I will deal with it. So I do not think that there's a problem there. If he was given the opportunity to say, well, this is going to be a long way down my list of priorities. On the general aims of this are set out actually in paragraph 4.2. If I can just amplify some of those things there. A lot of what this is actually would do is it will make this agreement LGR compliant, if that's the right word. Because as an outsider looking at NEPP, if you wanted to break it up and you've got either assets or liabilities, which there will be, the question will be, well, what do we do with those? And the moment that agreement does not say it is basically silent. This clarifies that matter. So that will solve an LGR problem. And even whatever happens in nearly 3 years' time, there'll still be an issue of what happens with the cash if it carries on. So that resolves an LGR issue. The next thing that I think as an outsider you'd be looking at is saying, well, what exactly does NEPP do? And at the moment, there is nothing in the contract that actually specifies down that long list of works which bits remain with Essex and which bits have been outsourced. It's an outsourcing contract. An outsourcing contract has got to say what the outsourcer does. And very stark demonstration of this was actually in the last meeting. We had the Essex officer and the substitute Essex member clearly unaware that new build TROs relating to new builds will always remain with Essex. A discussion in the meeting, and it actually been voted on in the meeting before that. So when you've got members of the committee and officers not even knowing what the split is, it's a very good idea to have in the contract exactly what that split is. So that's just putting in, not changing it, it's just putting in evidence from elsewhere. On the rest of it, we've already pointed out we are working contrary to our contract. You don't want to have that on your record. If somebody starts asking, well, why you sign these things off when you shouldn't be, this just resolves that. It doesn't resolve the finances, but it does resolve the fact that we're in breach. It says, the changed version would say, we can carry on doing TROs, provided they can be done within the year's finances. And the rest of it is simplification, getting rid of appendices that were brought forth from somewhere else that mean nothing. And my sort of personal background on this, I used to be a manager looking after IT outsourcing contracts for a big reinsurance broker. And one of the contracts had in it these clauses and bits which no one could understand. And when it came to crunch time, the aggravation it caused was way out of proportion to the contract and how it could have been sorted out in the first place. So when I saw this, I thought, this is a tidying job. So I don't think this, from a legal point of view, I don't think it's a big job for them to go through it. From an officer and member point of view here at this point, there's nothing more for us to do at this point. No work here. It goes to Essex, and then we see what they have to say about it. And then, yes, it may fail at some point when one council never gets to finish it off, but let's at least get it so we've got the contract there. And maybe, if Essex like it, it all comes back up, all clean, it can then go to the various cabinets along with all the other business of the day, with the briefing, like LGR actually, like the LGR agreements, we're being told when it gets to the final one, it'll be, you can't alter it when it gets to your cabinet or your council, it'll be either yes or no. So that will be the position. And I'm guessing it's presented reasonably, it should go through. So, and we've done the work to think this through. So I urge you just to vote for this, to go through to legal, let's see what happens. Yes, it may fail, but let's not just stop at this point. We've done the work, done the thinking, and it will make life better for LGR.
Does anyone else have any comments? Nikki?
I listened to the comments that have already been made for Councillor Goss and Hardway in the sense, and I agree, I don't think that the changes are as simplistic as you've actually said there, and actually I would refer back to the cost it's going to actually could incur on officers' time when we have actually got LGR, which is taking up a significant amount of time currently at the moment to actually have this go through. So I'm just going to, I've thought about this an awful lot. So while I appreciate a lot of work has gone into reviewing and updating the amendment, I do not believe it's appropriate for this committee to be approving amendments to a legal agreements before Essex County Council legal team has had the opportunity to review the document. This draft contains changes that will have a significant legal and operational implications to all partners and authorities. Yet, as of today, we do not have any formal advice or validation from Essex County Council legal to confirm the robust or appropriateness of these amendments. Moreover, it is not the role of elected members to be rewriting legal agreements or operational policies. That function is best led by professionals and officers based on the technical and legislative aspects. Our role is to provide an oversight and a democratic accountability, not to draft policies, wording or restructure legal frameworks. That is where I have my concerns. Yes, we need Essex to have a look at this, but I have a look at the timing of this with LGR and it actually going through and the amount of officer time and whether it will actually bring any benefit depending on how fast LGR escalates after September.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other comments?
Just quickly respond on that. The first point was about we shouldn't do anything without it going to Essex. That is exactly what we're requesting for it to do, is to go to Essex. So at this point, no more work here. It's for Essex to have a look at. So we are actually, if this is voted through, we're actually fulfilling the thing which you're requesting that we do.
As much as this is you're requesting today is a proposal to go to Essex, as members and elected members, it is not our responsibility to actually write policies and legal requirements. It's not within our remit to do that. To actually see that document come through, I see that and officers and people with the legal skills should have actually been involved with that from the very beginning. Yes, we are asking it to go to Essex. My concern is that with LGR and the fact that it could well be that it doesn't go anywhere. It could be what you said, we had 3 yeses, but we haven't defined what that yes is. They will possibly review it. The length of time that officers will spend on this is disreported. Okay. Yeah.
I've got Martin, then Mick.
I don't disagree with some of your observations, actually, that we are governance, we're not paid solicitors, and we're not, I mean, you've actually got a similar background to me. I work in insurance, I've managed contracts, I'm a project manager, I'm now a contractor. My goodness, how scary is that? And I don't disagree, though, that actually, you know, I know I understand law and policy, but I'm not, you know, my dad was a solicitor, but I'm not. That was a career choice. So what I did when this was being looked at is I delegated it back to officers and said, all yours, Gov, you can deal with it because you're the professionals. And I've just spoken to Richard, and from his perspective, he's quite comfortable with the changes on the whole. So if I vote yes, my client officer is happy, but that's because they did the work I didn't. So actually picking up on your point, I let the professionals get on with it. So from my perspective, from Colchester's perspective, I'm comfortable because the right people have looked at it. But I absolutely take your point. It is quite clear that Neil's got quite a good understanding of contracts and stuff from his professional background.
I did contract law as a chartered accountant.
Exactly. So, and I've picked that up from just your questions. So you do have that expertise. But on balance, and the fact that you've contacted Essex and Essex has committed, well, allegedly committed, then it will then be on their head to look at it, and they might come back and say, don't agree with any of what's suggested, and come back with a whole raft of changes, because that's what tends to keep the lawyers paid, because they all have different views on contracts and they have comments upon comments, having done contracts myself in IT. But upon balance, I will support it going to Essex, but I absolutely take on board what you've said, and hopefully what I've said might help to say that, at least from my perspective, the officers certainly from Colchester, have done the work. I haven't touched it, so you can rest assured of that.
Does any Mick?
That's been, you know, as an interesting discussion, but I think I would also like to sort of confirm that this, you know, this hasn't been done in a vacuum by a couple of enthusiastic members of the committee. It's been an ongoing process that's been going on for well over a year. It has been referred to members on a number of occasions who will have had the opportunity, as Councillor Goss has done, to refer it to their client officers, and certainly my client officer was involved in looking at the rewording and redrafting, and I think from my perspective, it's actually going to make the ECC job easier. It's actually going to make you know, the tidying up job going into LGR a lot easier, because I think if they were presented with the agreement as it stands, without any member input, because we are actually physically making that document work, it would go right down the list of head scratching, don't touch kind of documents, because nobody would have seen it in operation. And I think what we're trying to do is almost preempt, as has been said, the LGR changes, or in anticipation of what might come along, and have a working document that has been scrutinised by people who have been implementing it. For, you know, I've been on this committee for 2 years, and it's not the sort of thing I'm my bedtime reading, but I have actually gone through it line by line with my officer and with Councillor Hargreaves, looked at the alterations, proposed alterations, and seen how they might work in practice. And so I think we're actually presenting Essex County Council with an opportunity to endorse the work that's gone on, you know, amongst the members and the client officers. So it's not just giving them a document saying, make what you can of that. We're actually saying, this is what we have made of it. This is what we think is going to make it work going forward. And I think it's going to make their lives a whole lot easier than they possibly could be further down the line. So I think ECC will welcome it. I certainly know from discussion with my cabinet colleagues, because we've looked at this in some detail in terms of withdrawing from the NEPP, about the budgetary issues. And so my cabinet colleagues are also keen to have this tidied up and have it as a proper working reference document that stands up to scrutiny and does what it says. Because at the moment it's clear that it doesn't cover a lot of the issues that could arise or may arise in the future. And I think if it goes through Essex, I don't think there's a huge amount of work involved. I think the work may well be coming back to our respective authorities for endorsement. But at this point, I think if we send it forward with a unanimous request to Essex to say, please have a look at this, see what you think, and then send it out to our authorities, we've now got the working knowledge and insight to answer a lot of questions that may arise, whereas 6 or 9 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to tell you what it meant, what it said. And so I would ask everyone to support it and say, you know, Essex, have a look. We hope it won't take too much of your time. We know you're all hugely busy, but we're trying to make your job a bit easier, to be perfectly frank. And then the work can come back to the members. So that I would really support it going forward unanimously now. Thanks.
Thank you. Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. I think as members, we have to recognise that there is a duty on us now to prioritise what is absolutely necessary in terms of work for officers in any organisation. Whatever happens, whatever configuration, 2, 3, 4 or 5, NEPP will not continue to exist with effect from the vesting date of the 1st of April 2028. And we know, I'm sat next to a colleague from Harlow, I haven't seen any configuration which puts Braintree and Harlow in the same unitary authority. So it is quite, and it will be down to the unitary authorities to determine how they wish to run their parking. It won't be down to us as districts because we will not exist. It won't be down to Essex County Council to do it because it will not exist. So my question would be, is it possible that we could survive to the 1st of April 2028 with what we have, and then our successor organisations can then determine how they wish to continue? I see no point otherwise in taking this forward. If we were going to continue on into the future, fine, but we aren't. We know that is not going to happen. Anyone who saw the ministerial webinar, quite clear, the government are not intending to slow down on this. So I really think with all the other work that particularly our legal officers and monitoring officers will have, I would not be placing this on. I think we in Braintree could live with what we've got without the whole world coming to an end over the next couple of years.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments? Martin?
Yeah, I mean, Colchester doesn't have any particular strong desire either way, from my perspective. I suppose a question that popped into my mind actually is we could send this to Essex, but what we try and do is time box it, because I do think that we've all raised, we've all raised in different ways, but probably the same point about the amount of time, the longevity of this. So I suppose to try and give people comfort, could we try and time box this so that not too much effort is put into it? So in other words, if Essex Legal Services say it's going to be 40 hours of work or 35 hours of work or whatever, is there a way of just trying to minimise the amount of work on this? I think Neil's right that we've actually done, we've answered the exam question for them and we've given them the workings. So there should be little for them to do. They're almost marking it and maybe changing it and putting some comments on it. So I don't have an issue pushing it to Essex, but I do take on board what colleagues have said, because I raised it myself about cost and time and everything else. But on balance, I'm happy to push it forwards, but I don't want a whole load of time spent on it. I think, if it's time spent on LGR, that's always going to be higher priority. So I think we need to try and drive out how quickly Essex can look at it and actually how many hours they think they'd have to spend on it. Because I think putting it then back through the sausage machine is just procedural, whereas you say it just goes onto a cabinet agenda and it's just an agenda item, and you would hope the person that sits on NEPP would then support it. So that would just be, I think, probably, hopefully, maybe a fair balanced summary to try and help us get this moved.
I've got Joe from Essex County Council. Would you like to come to the table, and then people will be able to hear you? Welcome to the meeting. It may pay to just mention who you are for anyone watching.
Yes, I'm Jo Haynes. I'm the client officer for Essex. I have been sitting at the back throughout the meeting, so I've been tending to cough quite a lot this afternoon, so apologies about that. I just wanted to clarify for you from the Essex sort of process point of view. I've been listening to what you're saying, just to clarify the legal sort of process that it takes sort of behind the scenes. You are almost having to go through Essex's governance before it comes out to all of you, because it's technically it's Essex's agreement that it's making with the NEPP to devolve those powers, isn't it? So Essex has to be comfortable with the wording of the agreement beforehand. So it wouldn't just be legal. You'd have to go through that governance process beforehand as well. So I just wanted to add that in because I think that's an important clarification.
Okay, Martin.
And just to clarify a point, when you say Essex's governance process, try saying that after a couple of gins, does that mean it's got to go to Cabinet for approval at Essex? Can you just explain a bit more about that?
It would certainly have to go through some additional approvals with regard to Essex Legal Services. So it definitely have to have at least our Cabinet member approval, our director approval. I will clarify whether it needs full Cabinet approval because it's our agreement it's different from yourselves taking on those powers, isn't it, and having that. So I will clarify that point.
As Essex are a participant, I would expect it to go to Essex Cabinet
anyway.
Yes, I would have, but I came into post towards the tail end of the agreement, and the only thing that's making me hesitate towards that is that I wasn't there to confirm that that did happen with this one. So if it didn't need to go through that route beforehand, some of the decisions go out via cabinet member, some of them go via full cabinet. It's dependent on the type and scope of the decision. But yes, it's an important one to clarify for you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for Jo while she's here? Mick?
Thank you, Chair. Just an observation on what Councillor Butland, the point you raised, Councillor Butland, about we won't exist in 2 years' time. Yeah, quite clear that's going to be the case, but whether we are 1 or 2 unitaries, we will still have a parking function to fulfil. And if we have a model agreement that can be used by 2 unitaries as opposed to 1, as it, you know, we're effectively a unitary now, 6 districts. We may well be 2 unitaries in the future, but the agreement could still be, you know, applied across the board. So you've got a model that you can take forward, rather than saying it's fit for purpose and we'll address it when we have clear idea of how the unitaries are going to work out. We actually have something that the unitaries could adopt quite quickly in order to maintain, hopefully, business as usual in terms of their parking functions. So that's kind of the way I see it.
Can I come back? I apologise, I will have to leave because I'm going off to a meeting on local government reform, starting at 3. We don't know the makeup of the unitaries, but the 2 unitaries will not necessarily, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever the unitaries are, will not necessarily consist only of people in North Essex. So there may be some who are currently in the South Essex parking partnership. It's not a nice, you know, curve. And what I'm saying is, if we can live with it at the moment, let's live with it. We'll have plenty of other things to deal with rather than just the parking partnership. What we need to do is to keep business as usual going. So that means supporting the colleagues here at the operational end and you know, keeping that done and satisfying our residents that the enforcement, etc., is duly carried out. I declare an interest. I'm also an Essex County Councillor. This would rate probably, I don't know, 345th on the total list of issues when you're talking about how you disaggregate social services, what you do with children's services, how we aggregate as district councils, our waste collection, all of that. I just don't think that we've got our priorities right. And I think if, as members, we've got to be really disciplined, because although we say it's a couple of years, time is not far away. You know, we're less than 11 months from having a mayor, and we'll be having unitaries in their shadow form in May 27, and vesting date will be the 1st of April 28, and that is going to speed by. And once we get the unitaries in their shadow form, power will flow away from existing authorities. Make no mistake about that. I mean, I'm not going forward, so I've got no personal axe to grind. But for those of you who might be thinking about going away, you'll be more concerned about what your new authorities are doing than what your existing authorities are doing. And with that, can I apologise, Chairman, for having to leave the meeting?
No, that's absolutely fine. I was aware of that at the beginning, and thank you for taking the time to come along, and safe journey to your next destination. Are we at a position where we can review the recommendation or vote, or would you, or if not, perhaps Graham would indicate, if you want to discuss more, whether Graham would indicate his view before he left.
Can I move that we take no further action at this stage?
the recommendation is I'm currently on page 55 is to note the North Essex Parking Partnership Committee.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
We've had a recommendation from Councillor Butland that we need to take before that.
Yeah, I realised that. I was just pointing out what the recommendation is, and that what we're looking to do is in effect negate that, isn't it? Yeah. So the recommendation is to note the North Essex Parking Partnership Joint Committee Agreement 2022 as amended draft version 4, and to agree to send the North Essex Parking and Partnership Joint Committee Agreement 2022 as amended draft version 4 to ECC's legal department for consideration. So that was the recommendation. But what now Graham is now saying is, and if you'd like to repeat that for...
I move that we take no further action on the report.
Now, will this require a seconder? Do we have a seconder for that? We have Nikki as a seconder. So it is, as mentioned, this is a simple first past the post vote. So could I have those in favour of Graham's motion, please indicate.
See, that's 2 members in favour, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. And those against?
See, 1, 2, 3 against.
So that's
that motion falls.
That falls, I'm afraid. So we're now in a position where we look at the recommended decision, and I do ask you to bear in mind the views of Nikki and Graham, which may give an insight to the future of where this may go. So can I ask for the views on the recommendation, those in favour?
There's 3 in favour.
3 in favour, and those against? And 2 against. So we're saying that we'll head off to Essex County Council. No, thanks for staying the extra, and we do value your input, and safe journey to your next event. We now move to item 14, Forward Plan 2025-26. This is on pages 111 to 115. To approve the forward plan for the Joint Committee of the North Essex Parking Partnership for 2025-26. The presenting officer is Owen Howell, Clerk to the Joint Committee.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think everyone will be glad to hear. I've got nothing to add to the report, so happy to take questions.
Do we have any questions? I can tell it's the last item on the agenda. Mick, I was joking, Mick. But away you go.
There's no question, just an observation from the discussion about the updating of the risk assessments regarding LGR. There's nothing, you've got the annual review of risk management and so on for next June. And it was mentioned by the officer that possibly something in 6 months could be brought forward, an interim report probably post-September, so that we may be able to look at that around that time rather than waiting for another year.
Thanks. Yes, I'll take that up with Hayley and see if she's happy to, if we go ahead with that September date for the 6-month review.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Martin, do you have a comment or no? Okay. Okay. So on this one then, the recommendation is on page 115 to note and approve the North Essex Parking Partnership Forward Plan for 25-26. Could I indicate all those in favour? And any against? I think that's unanimous. Okay, that brings me to the end of this meeting. I'd like to thank you all for coming along, and it's been quite a pleasant meeting, and I think we've got through quite a bit of business. So it does give you a little time to get out in the sunshine if you've got no other appointments. So thank you all for coming, and I wish you all a safe journey home.